Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far, or at least what is left of it, as I'm filming this on a Thursday right now. And I have a great video for you today on the top 5 from the House of Argos. Now, this video is very difficult to do, especially for me, because I do have every fragrance from the collection. And of course, this can all change depending on mood, situation, time of year. But if I had to choose 5, it's going to be these 5 right here as of now. So starting off, not ranked in any particular order, but Nemean Lion. Probably one of the few to actually have this in their top 5 from the House of Argos. Because if you follow along the channel, you guys know I love masculine fragrances, leather, oud. There is something to be said for a company that actually has the gumption to make something like this, because a lot of larger companies, their sales and marketing teams will say, oh no, you can't label something men's or masculine because then you're gonna, ostracize half of your, possible sales, and women won't want to wear that fragrance. Well, those are the fragrances that I want to wear as a man, even though I do love some beautiful unisex fragrances. You see Adonis Awakens here, even Danae perhaps could be considered unisex. But this here, unbelievable. It's got an understated, kind of sweet, woody note in there. I always say it sort of smells a little bit like an old church. Some green notes, some Scottish pine, so it definitely has an outdoor vibe. But for me, it's always been about the animalic leather and the oud in here. Just absolute class, absolute quality. Projection, longevity is insane with this one, as you would expect with the structure of this fragrance in particular. And Nemean Lion is just something that I always enjoy wearing. And for me, I do typically save it more towards like dress up and cooler weather occasions. But this fragrance is just incredible. And I've always said about Nemean Lion, it is one of those fragrances, you don't even have to see the man walking into the room. You can smell Nemean Lion and know that a man is in the room. And there's a lot to be said for companies that actually make fragrances like that nowadays. So it's certainly appreciated for Christian Petrovic and the House of Argos to do that. Now, Danae, you guys know I love this fragrance. Almost hard to sum up. It is very complex, but if I had to sum it up, I would say bright, warm citrus, beautiful woods. I believe there's like 3 or 4 different types of woods in this, and musk. And then, of course, you have a really nice kind of resinous floral note. I believe it is cistus in here. And this is just one of those, it's one of those fragrances. It smells good out of the bottle, but when you spray it on skin and let it dry down for an hour, it really comes into its own. Don't worry too much about the color variation in Danae. It is one of those things where Argos, they don't do any dyes in their fragrance. They're all natural coloring, and they will change over time, and they will possibly change with certain batch variations. In fact, I do have some samples from Danae that are a little bit lighter, like a pinkish sort of gold hue, and maybe I'll do a little bit of a review on that in a separate video, going over the slight differences of the darker Danae versus some of the other ones, but they're like 99.5% the exact same. Of course, with any natural fragrances, especially ones that don't use dyes and all the other fillers, you are going to have a little bit more batch variation in color, and I really appreciate that. I think more fragrance companies need to do that. You don't need to have something that stays the same over and over and over again. It really shows that they do treat their product as a very small batch, truly niche company. So that is appreciated, but I have heard that. Don't worry about the color difference. Danae is still Danae. Next one here, we got Triumph for Bacchus. Now, the original one is amazing. In fact, they smell pretty much the exact same again. Even Christian Petrovic said they did not change the formula on the extrait. They just made it at a higher oil concentration. Now, that will make some very slight changes in how the fragrance comes across, in my opinion. But it really is almost the exact same. Now, the extrait for me, I really love it because it holds on to those top notes just a little longer. One of those tobacco fragrances where you do get a faint hint of tobacco, but it truly is a base note. And as those top notes start to fade away, covering it up with the saffron, green apple, white peach, rum, as those start to fade away, it starts to get more and more tobacco heavy, which is one of my favorite things about this fragrance, is the development of it. Of course, it smells really good off the first spray. You get all those wonderful notes, and the tobacco is a little bit buried under there. And then, of course, 3 to 4 hours later, 12 hours later, especially with the extrait, the tobacco note really starts to come out and shine. Just absolutely gorgeous stuff, and there's a reason it is the best-selling fragrance from the House of Argos. People just love that stuff. Now, Adonis Awakens, probably, I would say, the most unisex or maybe even feminine-leaning fragrance in my personal top 5. But this stuff is just gorgeous, guys. The star of the show here is the rose and the sandalwood. Of course, you got some raspberry and vanilla in here as well. Gives it a little bit of a sweetness, and even with the chestnut mentioned in there, a little bit of a gourmand type of rose fragrance. But this is just absolutely incredible. I believe it has rose and rose absolute in here. So you really get that from the top notes all the way down to the dry down. You get that rose sticking around as the other notes sort of change. This stuff is just absolutely gorgeous. I couldn't imagine the Argos lineup without Adonis Awakens. For me, even as a guy, even though I would say because of the rose and some of the florals that may be leaning, slightly feminine, it is just an absolutely gorgeous fragrance. Very well done, very long lasting, insane projection. Probably one of the best projecting fragrances of the house. And Adonis Awakens, for me, especially with the notes and the structure of the fragrance, it's something that's just incredible all year round. You can wear it for summer. It's not too heavy. You can definitely wear it for winter time because you got a little bit of those sweet gourmand notes, and it does project and last very well. So just an all-around, year-round banger. That's just an unbelievable fragrance. So I know a lot of other people really enjoy Adonis Awakens. Now, last but definitely not least, I had this as number 1 last time I did a video from Argos, and it's hard to say if it's changed or not, but this is always going to be one of my favorite fragrances. This is Fall of Phaeton. You got some citrus, spice notes at the top, some ginger. You got agar wood, musk, leather, tonka bean. I mean, this fragrance is just absolutely incredible. Again, it's one of those fragrances, for me personally, one of the best parts about it, as good as it smells out of the bottle, as amazing as it is, when you first spray it on the skin, this fragrance just continues to last and develop. In fact, it seems like every hour and a half to 2 hours, you're almost getting a new fragrance after you spray on Fall of Phaeton. It really is that developmental, at least for me, on my skin. It really goes and shows the agar wood at about 2 hours into the fragrance, and then as you get more into the fragrance, you get more into that tonka bean, leather, and musk. Of course, up top, you still get a little bit bright freshness with that ginger and some of those citrus notes. This fragrance is just absolutely incredible. It is also one of those fragrances I think a lot of people appreciate. In my opinion, I haven't heard a lot of women talk about it, but in my opinion, I would say Fall of Phaeton is a very masculine fragrance. Not quite so much in the category of Nemean Lion, two completely different fragrances. But for me, that definitely leans more masculine in my opinion. And it's just an absolutely incredible fragrance. For me, Fall of Phaeton, it's just very representative of the House of Argos. It doesn't smell like anything else on the market. And it's also a fragrance that I haven't really heard a lot of people speak about, but it's something that I really, really enjoy. I've heard some people describe this fragrance as powdery, and I would not go that direction because for me, I'm not a huge fan of powdery. For me, powdery almost means dry. I would say if anything, it maybe is a little creamy. Creamy seems to actually be a little bit more of an appropriate term with the tonka bean. I believe it's got some vanilla in there as well. Whenever I think powdery, I do think a little dry. And for me, there's nothing dry about this fragrance. So this is just incredible stuff. Again, I don't hear it spoken about that much. But if you've not tried Fall of Phaeton, I think it's definitely worth at least getting a sample to check it out. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Maybe if you haven't heard of these fragrances, get a sample of them, try them out for yourself. Some people I know, fans of my channel and subscribers, are very much into the House of Argos, so it'd be really interesting to hear what your current top 5 is down below, because there's so many good ones from the house. Bacchus Immortale is another one that may have the best dry down of any fragrance with the birch, the oud, and some of the other notes in there. Palace Athene is just absolute class. Love triumphs over war, even though it's not my personal style. Maybe my most complimented fragrance from the entire house. Neptune's Trident, again, beautiful oceanic fresh scent with a lot of density and projection and longevity. The extrait really did that fragrance well. There's just so many things. I love Sacred Flame as well, but that's for me more of a fall fragrance and a cool weather fragrance. So it really is just so hard to pick, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Got a lot more coming for the channel, and I'll see you soon.